Yeah, another season of Marvel Pass cards have been officially revealed, and I think we might have another crazy broken season pass card, which you can see right here already on screen with Strife. Couple other cards I think are going to be really good as well. So we've got a lot to talk about in this video. I am a little sick, can barely breathe, got a crazy head cold, bad sinus headache, but I'll live. All I gotta do is sit here and talk about video games, for God's sake. I think I'll survive. So let's go ahead and talk about all these cards, and then also rate them from 1 to 4 stars, kicking things off here with Strife. And as you can see, Strife is a 4/6, another objective card here, another batch of objective cards really throughout this whole month. And he reads, play 3 on reveal cards. Then the reward is use the highest cost on reveal in your hand, which let's be clear, that objective is super easy to meet. I mean, just, you know, obviously any deck that's not specifically like an ongoing deck or an end of turn deck is going to be able to muster 3 on reveals. Frankly, even like some ongoing decks might anyway, like Spectrum and Sam Wilson, it wouldn't be hard necessarily to get to 3 anyway, because on reveal is just like the most common and most pervasive keyword. It's everywhere. So many decks have that. Super easy to activate this. Then this reward is also, I think, crazy good. Basically getting it on reveal from a big 5, 6, 7 cost card absolutely reliably out of your Strife is crazy. I mean, just think about like a White Tiger, right? Not even the craziest result. Just think about put a White Tiger in your deck. Strife is a 4/6 that gets you a 10 power Tiger. That is already a great play, right? A 4 cost White Tiger already would be insane, but the really, really insane result that you could practically guarantee is just Fin Fang Foom. You might not even need to play the Fin Fang Foom in your deck. You could literally just run a Fin Fang Foom, and in 75% of your games, Strife is going to get Fin Fang Foom's effect, starting out as a 4/6 that, you know, potentially gains 10, 12, 20, 50, 100 power, whatever, off your Fin Fang Foom. Just making him a 4 cost Foom, basically, is totally insane. And because Foom is 7, he's basically always going to be the highest cost guy in your hand. And I think that's a 2-card combo that actually just shows up in a ton of decks, and it's like Strife is nuts. And the cool thing is too, like timing wise, you can probably try to wait until the end of the game a little bit just to make sure you have more time to draw that Foom, and to also make sure that your opponent has played cards into your Strife. Also, they don't know what your highest on reveal is, and you do, so there's this big informational asymmetry as well that can really help when it comes to things like snapping, or, you know, dropping the surprise 30 points off your Fin Fang Foom or whatever. So ultimately, there's like combo potential out of this, where you could rip some big key thing, you know, like find the Artem Zola in your hand and create a cool combo like that. There's just raw power output from stuff like Fin Fang Foom, or sometimes, you know, just a White Tiger, like we said, is totally fine. You could do cool stuff like a Heimdall or something, where you just like preload a Heimdall and you still get to play big move cards on turn 6. There's like 17 different ways I can think about using this card, and all of them sound pretty good, but I don't even know if you need all of those, because I think just saying, hey, Fin Fang Foom makes this card completely broken sometimes, that might be all you need. The only kind of question is like a little bit of timing, you know, like you don't want to reveal all of your on reveals too early, so you might not want a deck that's all on reveals. But, you know, like we said, with move deck stuff, with just like whatever, you know, have a mix of end of turn and on reveal, you'll probably be able to control this just fine, and often force something like the Fin Fang Foom on the final turn, or the Heimdall on the final turn, whatever it is, right? Like you're going to build your deck in a way that makes that really easy to get to 3 in total, and probably still not that hard to time your 3rd activation as well for your Strife. Also, you know, you can just play this on the final turn as an objective card, unlike, you know, Activate, which sucks at the end of the game. Objective still works totally fine at the end of the game. So, you know, just slam this down and it's a 4 cost Fin Fang Foom on turn 6 sometimes. That's going to work fine too. Basically, any way I slice this card, it just looks totally nuts. I can think of so many ways to play it and such crazy results out of it. I think this just looks really, really, really strong. Honestly, at that Shu Lao and Star-Lord level, dare I say, perhaps even better. I think this card's scary good. All right, next up here is the super premium pass card, the Techno-Organic Virus, a 1-cost skill. It reads, on reveal, copy this to your hand with +2 cost and infect your other cards here. And that's going to replace their text with this text above me up here. Ongoing +1 power for each Techno-Organic Virus you've played. I kind of hate, by the way, how the front half of this card text doesn't actually tell you what it does. I don't know how that's going to display in game. I'm sure you'll like tab over and see another thing, but not the most intuitive card text. I guess just spacing wise, they wanted to do this and it didn't all fit. But anyway, the idea here is, right, being able to replace text and then have this kind of scaling ongoing effect where as you play more and more Techno-Organic Viruses, then basically, you know, that buff just keeps getting better and better and better. So, you know, the first one's everybody's +1. The second one, everybody's +2, which, you know, could be like +6 in a given spot, +9 in a given spot later on as you play more. So, you know, if you commit to playing these, you could end up with some pretty nice buffs. And I think the probably most obvious path for this is rocks. We've seen all these rock decks, and just summoning a bunch of little rocks and tokens is the kind of stuff you'd need. And you don't mind putting text on the rocks because you're not replacing good text, you're just replacing no text, right? So it's basically all upside on rocks or squirrels. Now that would turn off a Patriot. Like normally, you know, in the past, we wouldn't have wanted to do that necessarily because it would make your Patriot not work with your rocks. But now we don't need Patriot, we have Ozymandias instead. So this could be another way to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit and make your rocks a bit better. We've also got another angle for this, which is like an off-going deck, as I call it, where you have Sauron, Zero, or Enchantress right now, which can all turn off negative ongoing effects, stuff like your Red Skull effect going away. You can now use your Techno-Organic Virus as kind of a post-hoc Zero. Like normally you have to play Zero and then Red Skull. Now you can play Red Skull and then Techno-Organic Virus, and not only does it turn off that downside, but it also becomes an upside as well, right? Suddenly your Red Skull and anything by him is getting a little extra power from this ongoing effect. I guess in theory, you could also use this to combo with something like Goliath or Spectrum, where, you know, you just get extra ongoing cards on board so that your Spectrum then buffs your rocks, or your Goliath gets buffed by rocks that get the Techno-Organic Virus. So there are definitely a few angles for this card. Now, I still just have some questions on this one from like a timing and repeatability standpoint. For instance, this is not a card that makes any sense to play on turn 1. And even in something like a rock deck, you know, you're playing Rhino on turn 2, Debris on turn 3. Maybe this is a card that starts to come down on turn 4, right? So you got to have like things to weave in with it. Maybe, you know, you got a Mole Man plus a Techno-Organic Virus, right? Like something like that could work. But also a lot of those cards aren't necessarily that great at building out a single spot. So you could have, I guess, Rhino and 2 rocks after that curve I described. So maybe you put your Techno-Organic Virus there, Mole Man somewhere else. But then, you know, you've got a 3-cost virus in hand going into like turn 5 or whatever. That's you're playing your Ozymandias in this exact specific deck example, right? Then you go into turn 6 and you're maybe playing a second Techno-Organic Virus, right? And I think it's arguably worth it for 3 energy. Definitely going to be really, really hard to say this is worth it for 5, because it's going to be hard to have enough bodies down that have received the Organic Virus buff. Basically, the more you're playing the virus, the less energy and time you've had to play other stuff to receive the virus. So there's this kind of like, you know, give and take where it's like, I want 8 things on board to have the virus or whatever. I guess 9 in theory, right? You want like as many as possible. But I can't get all those down while also spending so much energy on the virus. Then you start asking questions about like, do I bring in a Quinjet or something to discount my virus so I can play it faster? But then like, I don't want to lose the Quinjet tax. And there's just all this little weirdness going on from a curve and kind of just timeline standpoint, where I really think a lot of games you're probably going to end up only playing this once, because that's all that's going to feel worth it. I think the second one maybe sometimes will weave in naturally, but might still be kind of awkward to actually play. So I don't know. That's where I'm left. Is like, is it worth it to just play this once in a rock deck? I don't think so. I don't think you're going to want to give up a slot in your deck for just that little bit of a boost on a couple rocks or whatever. So it's like, you need to play it twice. How does that fit your curve? Is it worth it to get, you know, +2 on each of the things that have been hit by the virus? Maybe. It's maybe. I could still just see people cutting this though, or definitely not like, you know, pushing into a super premium pass for it or whatever. And then like, does the Red Skull deck work? Again, I do like it better in that world because, you know, just having a one cost way to turn off some big downsides could be really nice. You know, you got like a Lizard and a Star Brand in a location, and it's like, yeah, I'll just rip the Virus there. It's way cheaper than an Enchantress, which you already use for that effect in many cases, although that one's nice. It can also debuff your opponent's stuff sometimes. So yeah, like I see a more obvious path forward in a Red Skull package. That said, that has not been the strongest deck lately. Like, you know, just has not been at the top of the meta. I played it recently, it felt better than I thought it would, but still just hasn't really carved out a big spot in the meta these days. So is Organic Virus enough to make that deck good? I don't really see that happening. So I'm just left a little wanting on this card. I definitely see some lines. I think it has possibilities. Just like if it only cost 1 extra every time you played it, I would be all over this card. I would be like, this is amazing. You know, like you can play it for 2 so easily, and then maybe even a third one creeps in. That seems really, really strong. Maybe too strong, of course. I don't know, but I'm just a little shaky on it as it currently sits. All right, moving on here to Wolverine Horseman of War. This one got a little bit of a buff since we initially saw it in the data mines. He's a 4/3 with objective. This has 5 or more power. That used to read 6. And then the reward for this objective is give one of your cards at each location +3 power. So assuming you have a card everywhere, which that's pretty trivial these days. Pretty trivial always, really. That means you're going to get +9 in total as a reward here on top of the +3 base body for Wolverine. That makes this 412 in total output. So definitely a little above rate for a 4-drop, assuming you meet this objective, which isn't necessarily hard to do, but it does take some specific work to push Wolverine even up to 5 power. You know, certain hand buff cards like Anakia, for instance, only pushes it to 4. Vision once only pushes it to 4. So do you play like a Forge ahead of time? Do you have an Ironheart hitting this later? Do you have an Agony that you play this onto? Certainly some breakpoints work fine, but I just want to say, like, you know, it does take consideration from the deck and a little bit of a timing consideration as well, because like Forge, not such a great card to play before your Wolverine, right? We are going to see Storm later in the video, who has a +2 buff specifically and does come down on turn 3 potentially. So that could be a really nice 1-2 punch here. Wolverine into Storm, or excuse me, the other way around, Storm into Wolverine to push him up to 5. So the question then becomes like, is this reward really worth it? And I think it has to be specifically in a deck that really values buffs. Like, in other words, +9 alone is not enough. You have to be able to scale those points additionally. So you need the Scarlet Spiders, the Captain Carters, the cards that are going to multiply basically that buff into even more output. Because I think just standalone won't be enough. So then there's actually a timing question, because, you know, this objective, for instance, that example we gave, like Storm into Wolverine. Yes, that's a great way to activate Wolverine for turn 4, but you don't actually want your objective going off on turn 4, right? Because you won't have all the other stuff to buff yet. So you're probably going to be like sitting on your Wolverine a little bit in hand. You'll want to have played down the Captain Carter. You'll want to have played down maybe the Scarlet Spider or something first. And then you're probably playing your Wolverine on maybe turn 5 or turn 6 or whatever, trying to kind of target those buffs a little better so that you can isolate the Captain Carter, isolate the Scarlet Spider, and then go from there, right? But like, as I break all this down, right, you can hear me even like I'm talking about like layers of decisions and lines and like timing and all this stuff. When I think about that versus just like, you know, Shu Lao Maverick, it's like, man, it's just so much easier to just play a bunch of stuff, spam it out, and then play a Maverick and Shu Lao it, and you get like a million more points than this can really offer you, right? And in comparison to the crazy big buff scaling that exists in other decks, this just doesn't really feel like it holds up to me. It's like it almost takes more work. The timing's harder. There's like curve considerations for all of it. I just don't know if I really think this is going to be worth it in that world. I feel like there's so many better ways to scale and multiply than this card can offer. It almost feels just a little bit too honest in its output to me. And I think it's going to be hard for this to find a home because of that. I just don't know if it gets there. Moving on here to Archangel, Horseman of Death. This is a 2/3 with objective. Your cards are destroyed 4 times, and then you get to resurrect 1 here with +4 power. So clearly here's some destroy synergy. 2/3 base on the Archangel, potential to pull back a card with +4. So that's kind of 2/7 out of this already. And of course, you know, the resurrected card is going to contribute some points as well. You know, how many that is obviously depends a little bit on the deck, but you could theoretically, you know, hit something pretty big. I don't think you're going to want to be isolating targets because you're going to have at least 4 things destroyed, but you might occasionally roll into the highest, best of those results, occasionally roll into the lowest, but some range of power, probably from like, you know, 1 to whatever, let's say average of 4 or 5 points off the resurrected card in some cases. Does mean, you know, maybe this guy's coming out as a 210 or 211 in total point output. Also, of course, resurrecting cards can sometimes create chains of benefits. You know, you resurrect the Moira, you kill the Moira again, and then, you know, you get multiple 0-cost deaths in hand or whatever. Clearly, there's some additional upside there. Do keep in mind stuff like, you know, dead pools and head pools don't go into the resurrect pool. So that could be a way to help you isolate targets, actually, where you're destroying things that stay out of the pool but still count as being destroyed. So you only have like one big thing left that got destroyed, and then you resurrect that bigger thing specifically. Might be hard to line all that up and concoct it, but there could definitely be some decks and game states that at least try to nudge that or take some advantage of that angle on this. But I do think this feels like a solid piece of destroy decks. You know, we've seen some of those like spammier destroys that are less about like Deadpool shenanigans and more about like just throwing out a bunch of 1-drops and like just burning through things and having the deaths payoffs and sometimes the Morgan Le Fay payoffs. That might be possible for Archangel because 4 is not nothing, but also 4 is such a trivially small number, honestly, for destroy decks that like I don't think you have to go spammy for this. If it was like 6 or 7 destroys or whatever, you might need a deck that pushes more that direction. But I think kind of anybody that's got a Venom or a Carnage can probably make room for Archangel here. So at the end of the day, you know, I don't know if he's going to make the cut because some destroy decks are just pretty tight in their lists and like pretty refined and might not really need just kind of a 2-cost powerhouse, you know, 2-cost power contributor that's 10 points, like we said, or whatever. Same time, you probably toss him in and feel good about it. So I think this just seems like a solid option for destroy cards. Nothing crazy, just nice and solid. Next up here is Polaris, Horseman of Pestilence. She is a 2/2 with objective cards in play are afflicted with -5 power. And then you get to put a card from your hand here. So basically potentially cheating out something big and awesome as long as you have afflicted enough stuff on board. Do keep in mind this is counting both you and your opponent. So like a single hazmat or whatever is easily going to activate Polaris. Some locations actually might just easily activate Polaris, right? There are locations that can also negatively afflict. Frankly, like one card with a decently sized affliction could activate Polaris. So I don't think it's necessarily a hard thing to do. You know, just toss a Caliban in your deck or whatever, Omega Sentinel in your deck. Like that's going to be enough for your Polaris. So it's not a hard thing to do, but you know, you do have to do it. The cards have to be in your decks. It's going to have to be a deck running Polaris, not running Caliban, a deck running Omega Sentinel, right? So that means just not every deck's going to be able to make Polaris work, but it's also not crazy to just toss 2 or 3 things in and assume you're going to get there. So I actually think this could be fine in a like Doom 2099 list. Like right now, those run Moondragon and Chamber. I've always felt like Chamber's a little bit underwhelming in that deck. But, you know, if you've got the Polaris in there anyway, or excuse me, the Caliban in there anyway, you could maybe like toss Polaris in, have the Caliban, maybe an Omega Sentinel goes in on that 4 slot instead of Iska. Like, you know, there's some variations for like kind of an affliction version. And the deck tends to have bigger things to pull from hand so that there's a nice reward actually here where you're cheating something pretty solid into play, occasionally ripping a Dr. Doom or an Iron Lad with some upside, right? Or you get something decent as a result. So kind of looks like an angle there. Of course, you could go into a full affliction deck as well, so it's very trivial to get the objective completed here. But then it's like, well, is the reward good enough? Like, yeah, sometimes you'd hit an Ajax, but sometimes you might hit something small because that deck just has a range of costs in it. Then it might not feel quite as worth it for Polaris, but at the same time, she might be free. And if you just get a Diamondback or something, sometimes like, hey, yeah, I ripped the Diamondback. That's awesome. Rip the Hazmat as a bonus. That's fine. Rip the Luke Cage. Save myself, you know, whatever. Definitely some possibilities there. So again, this is another one that's like, this isn't calling out to me as a card that like changes the deck or like really opens anything up, but at the same time, it looks solid. Like I could see people running this no problem. I don't think it hurt the deck. Might help it a little. Just doesn't seem like a meta shifter sort of card, just like a good piece of the puzzle. So next up here is Storm, Horseman of Famine. This is another one that got a little bit of a nerf since we saw it data mined. It was initially a 3-2, now a 3-1. I think everything else stays the same here with this objective. End 2 turns in a row with unspent energy, and then give your other cards here and in your hand +2 power. So this is really nice potential hand buff card, like that +2, you know, scales beyond something like Nakia. Viv Vision, of course, can get to that level, but this is kind of all at once. Nice little rapid hit. Specifically, right, you would expect to maybe skip turn 1 and then skip at least 1 energy on turn 2, and then play this on turn 3 to have a really nice hand buffed hand. I think Silver Surfer decks in particular might be, you know, intrigued by that because they generally don't care a lot about playing on turn 1 and 2 anyway. So you have the Storm on 3 buffing, you know, the Broods, buffing the Sebastian Shaws, all those buff targets that Silver Surfer already loves. And then Storm, of course, herself later getting buffed as well. I think that's definitely the exciting line for Storm is like skip 1 and 2, go on turn 3. Little bit harder to make Storm work later. She does have this ability to buff on board as well. But keep in mind, she's not buffing herself. So she is really just a 3-1. Like it says your other cards here. And like on turn 6, like, you know, yeah, you could do that, but like how good is that? You know, it's a +6 buff on board. That's just 3-7. Like, yeah, you hit the Captain Carter sometimes, whatever. Wouldn't be terrible in some board states, but that means you've also had to float energy on turn 5 and on turn 4, which again isn't necessarily terrible for a Surfer deck because you play a 3-drop on 4, turn 5, maybe you play a 3-drop again. It's definitely possible that she could still fill in the gaps on turn 6, but then you're only getting upside on the board, no upside in hand, I guess, unless you like had a Makari or something, right? You just happen to draw right then. But you know, there's this like, well, what about turn 5, right? Well, in a Surfer deck, you definitely don't want to skip turn 3. So, you know, if you're playing her on turn 5 to try to double dip and get board and hand, that's going to be weird because you just don't want to skip turn 3. So then you say, okay, well, what about non-Surfer decks? Does Storm work as well? Can you play this in a like High Evo deck that's clearly already trying to skip energy? Star-Lord, High Evo, Sunspot, etc., right? Sure, of course, right? Like natural fit there too with the unspent energy angle. I do wonder though in that one if you care as much about the buff. Because it's like, well, those decks don't generally have as many ways to scale buffs beyond just their honest output. And it's like, do they even want to take time to play a Storm? Because they might just rather be doing bigger, better things because they got like big numbers anyway. +2 here, +2 there on a She-Hulk or, you know, Star-Lord or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, I don't really feel that doesn't really feel that relevant, right? It's like, well, again, maybe Storm only got me in total 6 extra points because I might only play 3 of the buffed cards or something throughout the course of the game because it's just my stuff's bigger and more expensive. You kind of want cheap, smaller things or things that scale buffs. So it's like, well, yeah, okay, High Evo's fine again, maybe, but I don't really see her making the cut in a High Evo deck. I really do see like Surfer or maybe some other just totally new deck that really cares about buffs. We saw like the Wolverine stuff. I just think, you know, if this weren't 2 turns in a row, I'd be looking at this card a lot more closely, right? Because that would be very easy to like sometimes skip turn 1 and then float an energy on turn 4 or whatever. It would be trivial, right? Crazy easy. I think this card would be cracked. The fact that it has to be in a row though, like it, you know, it creates some weirdness, right? There's just certain curves like you just don't want to miss your turns 3 and 4 often in most decks, right? So like decks just have to have that power band in the middle of the curve where Storm just won't line up well. So I do think there's going to be some awkwardness there, and I think like really specific packages like Surfer are going to be the spot for Storm. And she might have a hard time escaping beyond that just because the 2 turns in a row is really, really tough for this one. So next up here is Askani'son. He is a 2/3 with Activate. Create a 1-cost card at another location and then increase the cost each time you're winning here as the turn starts. So this is a, you know, card you definitely want to play on turn 2 to try to get as many bonuses to your summoned card as possible. So, you know, you play it on turn 2, you go into turn 3, you're winning, it increases to 2 cost. You go into turn 4, you're winning, it increases to 3 cost. Basically, it's always kind of turn -1 on the cost of the card. So you go into turn 6, if you're winning, you get a 5 cost card, I guess, out of Askani'son, which, you know, in theory, on average, is probably what, like 7 power? So you get a 2, 3 plus 7. That's 10 total points. Honestly, not that great compared to like Chamber or Moondragon or other scaling 2-drops. Not that great, and also crazy inconsistent because you're not always going to be winning. It's not that trivial to win. Often this is going to be a 2-3 that summons you like a random 2 cost, a random 3 cost, and that's going to suck, man. Like sometimes it's going to backfire and just terrible stats or things that hurt you. You discard a card, destroy a card, like unpredictable summoning location. Just looks terrible. Also, like you top deck this thing later than turn 2, forget it, right? Just garbage. Just so much worse at the end of the game. This card just looks really bad. I think at the very least they should have started it at 2 costs that you can get up to 6. I did do that math, right? Like it's 1 cost to start. You go into turn 3 as the turn starts. So on turn 3, yeah, it becomes a 2 cost. Yeah. I don't know. It just looks so terrible, dude. Like bigger base stats. It's one of those series 4 cards they're going to give you in a game mode, so they don't want it to be good, I guess. I'm so sick of that. I mean, we did get Ozymandias recently. It was pretty good, I think, but for the most part, most of these limited time game mode event cards are just bad. This is one of the worst ones I think we've seen in a while. I just see no way to use this card successfully. Now, Mother Askani is another one of the limited time event cards. I do think this one has some potential, actually. So, a bit of a mixed bag this month. 4/4 here for Askani. And she reads, on reveal, give the leftmost card in your hand +2 power and -1 cost. Then copy it, which I think is pretty cool. Like, that's a nice mix of stuff. You've got a little bit of like Moon Girl here plus Majestic Wingbeat, which we don't see either of those cards a ton, admittedly. But I think like condensing all of that into a single thing does give you some potential here for Mother Askani, right? Like 4/4 isn't the greatest base stat line, but assuming you play that card, this kind of looks like a 3/6 if you think about it, right? Like -1 cost +2 power, but then also the copy can offer even more upside as well. So it's like not that big of a tempo sacrifice to play Askani. And then you can imagine some cards or payoffs here that are really spicy, right? What's Moon Girl run already? Like She-Hulks, where you get a buffed She-Hulk and copy it. You skip turn 5, you get to play some 1/12 She-Hulk dump on the final turn. I think about Zombie Galacti a little bit with this deck, a card that can often filter itself down to the left side of your hand as you kind of play things out because it gets left and stuck. Suddenly your Zombie Galacti gets +2 and -1 cost. I don't know if that deck needs this. Might be a little expensive for that deck. It tends to run a little lower cost to make sure they can play as many green cards as possible. But I mean, definitely a possibility. You don't need the copy for, the Zombie Galactus. So I guess, Zombie Galacti. So I guess Majestic Wingbeat would kind of just be better. But, maybe 2 of those isn't the worst. Just any big 6 cost card, right? Like a deck that's running multiple 6s could use Mother Askani to turn one of those 6s into a 5 to play it on turn 5 and then play it again on turn 6, maybe even weave in a 1-drop bonus, right? So just any deck with like big stuff that has time to weave something in on turn 4. I don't know. There's possibilities. I don't think this is like, again, meta shaping. I don't think this is going to warp any deck to just like instant and high power level status. But I could see this squeezing in here and there. This feels like it has enough utility, kind of a useful card to have in your collection. I think we could build some fun stuff around this one and have some decent decks. So better than average, perhaps, for a limited time game mode card. All right, so all that said, let's go ahead and rate all these cards from 1 to 4 stars, starting from the best and going to the worst. STRYFE is a 5-star card. Wait, didn't he say 1 to 4 stars? Yeah, he's a 4-star card, but as good as it gets for 4-star cards. 4+. STRYFE looks nuts. Storm, Horseman of Famine is a 3-star card. Archangel, Horseman of Death is a 3-star card. Mother Askani is a 3-star card. Polaris, Horseman of Pestilence is a 3-star card. Wolverine, Horseman of War is a 2-star card. Techno-Organic Virus is a 2-star card. Askani'son is a 0-star card. No, we don't do 0, but he's as low as it gets. He's 1-. This one looks real bad, really funny. The high and the low there across the best and the worst. So yeah, that wraps it up. Ultimately, I did think I was gonna like Storm a little more. I thought maybe we'd have a second 4-star card, but I don't know, talking through, I just don't know if I see it for Storm. I think that 2 in a row is really, really limiting. So ultimately, I think this is a month with a crazy strong season pass card. The rest, some solid cards, but maybe stuff you don't absolutely need. Of course, we might be surprised. Some decks might pop up that just really utilize these well. But boy, this card seems completely nuts to me. I hope I'm wrong, to be honest, because I don't want this to be yet another totally broken season pass card, as I'm afraid it might be. So all that said, share your thoughts on these cards down below. The ones you're excited to play, decks you're curious to try. I want to hear all that and more. Thanks, as always, for watching, and I guess I will see you around.